What is up, gamers? At the start of last year, I decided to dive into the Trails series, and after playing through all of the currently released games in the West, I wanted to make a video just about how amazing this series is. I was really blown away in particular by how passionate, precise, and high quality the entire series felt. I first heard about it on Twitter. I saw a lot of people posting pictures about different dialogue that was happening in the series, and honestly, it looked pretty crazy and it definitely caught my interest. I like the art style of a lot of things that came in. I was very curious why there were so many different characters that showed up in different art styles. I wasn't sure what exactly to think about it. So I decided to dive into the Trails series. So if you're in the same boat now and you've heard about Trails and was wondering what it was about, I wanted to make this video so I can kind of have like a pretty thorough overview of this series in general, talking about the good stuff, the bad stuff, the great stuff that I think they do exceptionally well, and also to give you some tips in case you were wanting to get into the series yourself. There's not going to be any story-related spoilers in this video, so don't worry about that. However, there are different arcs that appear throughout the series, and I will be going over a brief synopsis of the first little bit when you get into the series. So let's hop into it. The Trails series is made from a Japanese-based company called Nihon Falcom. These guys have been making games since the 1980s. Even though they have been around with the big gaming giants like Nintendo and Square Enix, they're a smaller company and they typically outsource their games to be translated, so their games usually have a Japanese release with other languages coming later. Because of this, the series is also referred to as Kiseki on social media. It is the same series as Trails, it is just the name that they call it in Japanese. Unfortunately, Trails is a relatively generic sounding name, and with the Tales of series and other things like that, there's a lot of confusion that can come along with the Trails name. All of the Trails games from Nihon Falcom will have the Legend of Hero in the titles before the Trails moniker. I still call it Trails and I will do so in this video, but I know there's a lot of murkiness around the series with its name that I just wanted to clear up. There are currently 13 games in the Trails series, and each game takes place in a Pangea-like continent called Zemuria. What amplifies the impressiveness to me is that the in-game timeline from the first game is less than a decade to the current game released. This isn't a series where games are loosely connected, if they're even connected at all, and this isn't a series where they time skip their protagonist's story to go to their great descendants. Nearly everything they do in this world is going to have some sort of ripple effect, and it compounds with each game that you're playing. You get to learn the laws of the world, the different factions, how they interact with your team, and other neutral parties. Events that happen in each game complicate and change these dynamics of these different factions as well. Personally, I think the return on investment for each Trails game that you play just makes the series that much better. I really like how Trails explains the different concepts in their world too. Technology, for example, is made possible from devices called orbments. They're basically the catch-all equivalent of electricity, gas, or some other fuel resource in our world. They power lampposts, stoves, cars, planes, and there are even personal orbments that people can carry, which give them access to magic-like abilities called arts. Orbments are very versatile, and they are a cornerstone of how technology functions and thrives throughout Zemuria, and it's something that isn't really taken for granted when you're playing through the series. One cool world element I love is that whenever you defeat enemies in combat, they will drop elemental crystals, which are called sepith. You take these sepith and can trade them to shopkeepers using a barter system to exchange it for money, or you can use them to create quartz, which help power and augment your skills. They also use different terminology like mira being the form of currency, different name lengths to replace miles and kilometers. It does feel like they came up with different rules that they wanted pre-established before even beginning on the first game, and I think it's pretty cool that they've kept a lot of these rules in place throughout making each different game. Even though I think the world is really cool, where Trails really shines in my opinion is the care that they put into their cast of characters. I'm not gonna lie and say that I think every character is awesome or that their story is amazing, but I will say that the way characters are presented and how they grow throughout the series feels a lot more genuine than other game series. Trails honestly tackles some pretty heinous shit that I don't think other gaming companies would touch with a 10-foot pole, if I'm being honest. While Trails looks like a pretty generic anime story with a lot of anime tropes, and believe me, there are a lot of anime tropes, I hope you'll believe me that They do such an amazing job making characters that are like a stone slab, each being carved out in their own unique way with their own flaws and their own strengths, and it's something that's extended to party members as well as villains too. Hell, even NPCs have a lot more care than other RPG series. To give a quick example, whenever you go into a shop in a typical RPG, shopkeeper will usually just say, "What are you buying?" with maybe a little sass or pizzazz added in. But Trails is a little bit different. When you talk to any sort of shopkeeper, the first option is always to initiate a dialogue with the shopkeeper, not to shop. While yeah, a shopkeeper isn't going to be the most interesting NPC to chat with, I do appreciate that you can talk to the weaponsmith Greg, who talks about how he's excited to go see his grandkids' bicycling competition over the weekend. Even if they're not in your party, Falcom likes to remind you that these NPCs are also inhabiting the world alongside you, and they're advancing their lives while you're progressing your way through the story. A lot of the series has you help out the average everyday person, and while I usually don't like the small stuff in games, Trails really has gotten me to appreciate how to stop and smell the roses. The thing I would say about the Trails series is that they don't like to take any interaction for granted, that they try to make every character as relevant as they can, even if they're just a common passerby that you're not going to see very much in the game. They truly do want you to care about every individual NPC in the world, not only like the main cast, and I think that's something that's truly unique about the series. The best way to describe combat for the Trails series would be moving around on a tactical map similar to Fire Emblem or Final Fantasy Tactics with a turn structure of Final Fantasy X. Also similar to Final Fantasy X and Final Fantasy Tactics, different actions have different delay periods, so if you attack versus just using an item, you're going to be able to act sooner after using an item than you would if you were to attack. The added twist of combat are called turn bonuses, and these randomly appear on any given turn and will give a bonus to whoever's turn it is. There's a myriad of different effects that change throughout the different games in the series, but one that I think is pretty fun is that the critical turn bonus makes anything you do a crit, including critical items. You have 3 separate resource bars to manage in combat: HP, EP, and CP. HP is pretty obvious, it's your hit points. You may be able to surmise that EP with its blue bar looks similar to a mana bar, and you would be correct. The concept of magic isn't absent in Trails, but people use those personalized orbments that I spoke about earlier to cast generalized spells, be it supportive or damage dealing. You can open up slots on your orbment which allow you to add in more quartz for more spells, and that also increases your max EP. EP stands for energy power, and I absolutely love that the in-world mechanic is that it is the battery life of your orbment, so when you unlock more of your orbment, you gain more EP. You are basically extending the battery life of your orbment. Lastly, CP stands for craft points, and these would be the character-specific abilities that a particular character would have. Whenever you deal or take damage in a fight, your craft points will increase to a total of 200. They do persist between battles, but when a character falls, all your craft points will reduce to 0, and you're going to have to raise them back up again. If you have 100 or more points, you can use all of your current points to use an S-craft, which is basically a character's ultimate ability. There's an extra bonus to where you can use these S-crafts anytime in battle, interrupting a turn from whoever was about to go. So you can use this to swipe a bonus that an enemy was about to get, or use it right before you think a character is about to die, but due to delay, it will take longer for that character to act again. Each arc has more mechanics unique to the arc itself, so this is just a generalized overview. There is a little bit of a learning curve with combat, and in every arc I didn't enjoy the combat until I really broke it down and adapted to what works best in the specific arc. My advice would be to try things out at your own pace, and when you feel comfortable enough in the game, dive in and start breaking down the mechanics to see where you can get the best benefit for your team. I think if you try to figure out combat right away, you can easily get overwhelmed and frustrated. I do think that the combat of the Trails series is really in-depth and fun, and I would love to talk about it more, but I don't think it's worth it to get into it when this video is made for people who haven't even played the series yet. If you would like me to make a combat-based tutorial, let me know, because I'd be super down to do it. I don't claim to have the most OP builds, but I think making something that's a good foundation for people would be a great starting point. Now that we've dabbled in the general idea of what the Trails series is about, let's talk about the games themselves. I mentioned that there are 4 different arcs in the continent of Zemuria earlier, so it's time to explore a little bit about each of these so you can have an idea on the different settings, as well as to try and help narrow down where you would like to begin your Trails adventure afterwards. After describing the arc, I will give a few reasons why I think it would be a good place to start, or give you some considerations to think of if you were to start there in your first game. The Sky Arc is the beginning arc in the series, and it takes place in the small country of Liberl in southwest Zemuria. You'll be playing as a girl named Estelle Bright. One night, her father Cassius comes home from a job carrying a young boy who seems to be injured. Fast forward 5 years to the year 1202, and the boy, now known as Joshua, was adopted into the Bright family, where him and Estelle want to follow in Cassius' footsteps in order to become bracers. I would describe a bracer as a mercenary who focuses on helping out the common folk. They're not considered a military force, and they're not tied to their country's government, so the whole purpose of a bracer is to enrich the lives of civilians around them. Because of this, bracers will frequently take on varied and unique jobs. It could range from keeping the highway free of monsters to delivering an item across town, or it could be something more specific like helping a farmer gather their crops. After becoming fully fledged junior bracers, Estelle and Joshua hear that their father has to leave on a top secret business trip and decide that they're going to go to different towns across the world to familiarize themselves with the real world. There are 3 games in this arc, and they are Trails in the Sky FC, which stands for first chapter, Trails in the Sky SC, second chapter, and Trails in the Sky the third. There currently is a remake of the first chapter that Nihon Falcom is creating that will be coming out in September 19th, 2025. It takes on the same art style as their new games. I love their current art direction, and the older games can look a little bit dated, but understand that you will have to jump from the new style back to the old style if you're interested in playing the second or third game right away. I do think the old games have a lot of charm in them, and I didn't have any issues playing them personally. Even though I started playing the series last year, I already feel a little nostalgic for those old isometric graphics, so I really don't think playing the original games are that bad. The second arc is my favorite arc, the Crossbell Arc, and it takes place in the year 1204. You'll be playing as Lloyd Bannings, who recently finished his studies to become a detective, following in the footsteps of his late older brother. He returned to his home city of Crossbell because he received an employment letter from the Crossbell Police Department. The police do not like that the Bracer Guild in Crossbell has gotten more popular with the populace than the police, so they created a throwaway group known as the Special Support Section, or the SSS, as a form of propaganda to help civilians, as the police force do not like the public and do not want to assist with what they consider to be trivial matters. Now, Crossbell itself is a gigantic city which is surrounded by 2 immensely powerful nations, the Erebonian Empire to the west and the Calvard Republic to the east, which both use it as a puppet state for economic trade. Lloyd, as well as the other members of the SSS, take this opportunity to help out the civilians of Crossbell and investigate the plethora of factions inside the metropolis. There are 2 games in this arc, Trails from Zero and Trails to Azure. I was confused by the release date of these games on Steam, so I just want to clarify that these 2 games came out before the next arc in Japan, but Falcom prioritized the next arc being officially translated over these 2 games. If you want to play release date order, these are going to be the 2 you would play after the Sky Arc. The third arc is the Cold Steel Arc, and it also marks the beginning of Falcom moving their world into 3D. Also set in the year 1204, it takes place in the militant country of Erebonia, where they invoke a feudal system similar to the Middle Ages or Game of Thrones. You will be playing as Reen Schwarzer, who was accepted into Thor's military academy. He and 8 other students join up as a mix of nobles and commoners into a class called Class 7. Class 7 is more of an experimental group, as the other classes of Thor's also use that same feudal system. There is a mysterious old schoolhouse which predates the current school administration, and your task as Class 7 will be to investigate and solve the mystery of the ever-changing schoolhouse. Reen and the rest of Class 7 will also be deployed to different kingdoms through a railway system within the Erebonian Empire to help assist with issues that these kingdoms may be having while tensions are rising behind the scenes throughout the gigantic country. There are a whopping 5 games in this arc. Trails of Cold Steel 1 through 4, and then the 5th game, which is Trails Through Reverie. In case you're interested, they moved from their first iteration of 3D models and started refining their unique art direction, which starts at Trails of Cold Steel 3. The 4th and current arc is the Calvard Arc, and as of this video, it has 3 games in it. Trails Through Daybreak, Trails Through Daybreak 2, which just came out on the West on Valentine's Day of this year, and the latest game titled Trails Beyond the Horizon, which is scheduled to come out in January 2026. You'll be playing as Van Arkwright from the Calvard Republic in the year 1208. He is a Spriggan, and they take on jobs in the air of a detective, negotiator, bounty hunter, things of that nature. Spriggans don't follow any sort of lawful code. While bracers have a duty to protect civilians, the police have a duty to protect the law, and students have a duty to protect the reputation of their school, a Spriggan will flirt with the line of legality, and their considerations are much more open. A young lady by the name of Agnes asks for your help in retrieving an artifact that was once her great-grandfather's, but was stolen by a mafia cartel that quickly rose to power. As Agnes is unable to turn to the Bracer Guild or the police for her problem, Van accepts the request and works with his network of informants to help assist her. Side note, combat has taken a drastically new approach in Daybreak. You can now fight outside of combat and dodge out attacks, and you can press a button to initiate the more traditional turn-based battle system. The new Trails in the Sky remake also seems to have this feature. Okay, you may be asking, Dybbuk, you just bombarded me with information, where would I even start this series? I might have people disagree with me, but I truly think you can start on the first game in any of the 4 arcs. There is an overarching story and characters reappear in later games, so the Sky first chapter is going to be the de facto best starting point. However, even individual Trails games are not that short. I think it's a huge disservice to say that you have to play the first game to the last game sequentially in order to get any sort of enjoyment out of the series. Each arc has its own main plotline as I've described, and you can still have a ton of fun with that regardless of playing the games before it. My personal recommendation would be to treat the first game of each arc as its own standalone series. From there, you have 3 choices. If you find yourself invested in the world, then I believe the length of the series isn't going to matter to you anymore, and going back to the Sky first chapter will be a no-brainer for you. If you don't care about the world, but you do think the story that the arc is telling is interesting, then I would continue with that arc. And if you don't care about either of those things, then maybe Trails just failed at grabbing your attention. It happens. I've seen a lot of posts on Reddit, Twitter, and Blue Sky about people who started in different arcs that went back and still had fun with all the other games. So don't let starting in a particular spot stop you from experiencing how great this series really is. If someone wanted to start their first Trails game having no prior knowledge, my recommendation of starting games would be Trails in the Sky first chapter is the first game. Second game would be Trails of Cold Steel 1. Third game would be Trails from Zero. And fourth game would be Trails through Daybreak. I also want to talk about why each of these games would be a good starting point to start over the others as well, in case it helps convince you on where to start. Obviously, with Trails in the Sky first chapter being the first game of the first arc, that's going to be the optimal starting place, but because of it being a little bit older, I have a few quick points to try to persuade you to start here. Firstly, a big appeal to me in any franchise that I play is I love to see how companies grow with the series that they have on their hands, and Trails is probably the most drastic of all of them, especially because it's the same world and the mechanics of the games adapt and change as well. There's just a lot that they have to work with whenever they come out with a new game. Graphical change is obviously a huge one, but how their combat evolves, you get to experience all of their great music, characters and the scenarios they introduce and how they kind of adapt over time. There's just so much to take in, and I feel like Falcom has an immense amount of passion for the series. For me personally, I could feel their confidence increasing with each game that they were making. The second thing I would say is that the Sky and Crossbell arcs have a lot of charm when you play through them. In both of these arcs, there are little chest messages, and whenever you open up a chest, you can talk to it again, and there are these little messages that can actually be kind of funny jokes or trivia or other random things. And also, when I looked through my previous playtime for each game, I did get through these Sky and Crossbell arcs a lot faster than the other arcs. So I think it's less of a time investment. It's easier to kind of get through those arcs if you want to, and you still get all the experience of the story. Naturally, there will be characters that appear from the earlier games to the later ones, and playing through the games in chronological order will give you an immediate understanding of characters as soon as they pop up or if they get hinted at and referenced in later games. It's kind of a given, but because Trails is thorough in their storytelling, when a character does a surprise entrance on screen or they're referenced in passing, you already know their whole backstory and context, and you already know what these characters are like and what they're going to work with, and I think that's a lot of fun to know as well. And of course, they are coming out with the remake of the Sky First Chapter, which has their awesome new graphics. After you beat that game, you'll need to go back to the original graphics, as I assume they aren't packaging the second chapter with it, so I'm a little scared that people will not want to go and play the second chapter after beating the remake. I think the story is good enough that a lot of people will dive into it. I do think the original art style is super fun, and even though I started the series last year, I actually have a little bit of nostalgia for it. If you're a fan of older RPGs, I would definitely recommend starting with the Sky First Chapter, especially if you play the PlayStation 1 Final Fantasy games. I think that that's going to be right up your alley, and I think you should give that one a shot before you play any of the other games. The second game I'd recommend people to start with is Trails of Cold Steel 1. If you don't like the art style of the older games, this one is their first 3D game, and it also has English voice acting, which may interest you more. Cold Steel 1 by itself is largely separate from the first 2 arcs in the series, and you're gonna miss the least out of any other game if you start here outside of Sky First Chapter. When you get to Cold Steel 2 and later games, you're gonna be more on the world stage. It's a little bit more modern, so I think it might be a little bit easier to start with. I will say if you're a fan of the Persona or Xenoblade Chronicles series and starting on Sky First Chapter doesn't interest you, then I would recommend starting at Cold Steel 1 for the reasons above. Trails from Zero is the third game I'd recommend to pick as your first game. Crossbell and Cold Steel arcs happen at the same time, so you're going to be a little bit spoiled no matter which one you play from one to the other. Crossbell is more vague about what happens in Cold Steel, so there's an argument to be made with your first game being this one over Cold Steel 1. I do have this listed as my third recommendation because it is graphically similar to the Sky arc, and as I mentioned in the Sky portion, I do think it's easy just to blast your way through the games pretty quickly. They're not quite as long as the other ones, so I do think it's just better to start with the Sky arc and then go into the Crossbell arc afterwards. It may be really tempting to start with Trails Through Daybreak, but just understand that it's the 11th game in a series that heavily focuses on world building. It's going to be kind of hard to avoid talking about what other neighboring countries have done or things that may have transpired less than a decade ago. Add in that the Calvard Arc is still coming out with games. If you start here, there's a good chance you're going to catch up while they're still working on the games. If you start with the other arcs and then get to Calvard, they may be finished and then you can binge it and or maybe they won't finish because their game series has been going on forever. That being said, I don't think this should be something that holds you back from playing the series. If you only want to start with Trails Through Daybreak, I think you should start there. I think that's totally fine. I do still think you'll have fun if you play and start with Trails Through Daybreak. I just think there may be a few things that would come up that may hurt your experience if you start with it. No game or series is perfect, and I like to be fair when giving my opinion, so there are a few things I'd like to mention about the series, just as a heads up, and I'd also like to give some advice on how I got around it personally as well. The series does start out slow. It is a very intentional choice by Nihon Falcom, and they spend a lot of time on the foundation of the arc that you're playing, so when they ramp up the story, they don't have to go back and explain things from there. If you ever start to feel demotivated or uninterested in playing, I was there with you. There are a few different points where I wanted to stop playing the series, and I took pretty long breaks because I just wasn't feeling it. I would like to reassure you that every time Falcom wanted to set the stakes high, I became so invested that playing any other game was impossible. In my opinion, the time that they spent cultivating the world for you really pays off in spades when they decide that they want to pull the trigger. And once that trigger gets pulled, you already know what's on the line and you're ready to go guns blazing to see why this is happening and how you're going to help resolve the issue. I know some people like playing the slower paced games, so this probably isn't going to be a negative for you at all. However, if you are like me, then something I would recommend would be to specifically watch either a stream on Twitch or watch a TV series or movie that you're very familiar of to watch during the low points of the game. I think watching a YouTube video or a new show that you've never seen before will require a bit of your attention, and ideally being able to split your focus when you're less interested can help you get to those big payoff moments that I think Trails does really well. I mentioned earlier that the Trails series has its share of anime tropes in it. That part itself isn't the negative, but it does have the lust-filled, horny, annoying characters present. This might be something that I'm overblowing, and maybe it's not really that big of an issue, but it does happen frequently enough that I got sick of seeing it, and it also is something that I can't really ignore if I'm going to be talking about the series. It happens so much that I was able to find the very common structure that they use when they do it. The basic rundown of the scenario goes like this. A character, which is usually the common perpetrator of these issues, will say something insane. Everyone around them will go, "Dude, did you just say that? That's insane." Then the perpetrator will then double down on their position to say something even more insane, and then the victims will awkwardly laugh it off and pretend that it never happened, and then the story will continue from there. Just to clarify, I think they do a great job with the actual romance side of their games. There's maybe like 2 couples that they put together that I think are kind of awkward, but compared to those, there's a lot more couples that are terrific. My issue purely stems from the characters that cannot control themselves to make these ridiculous comments for no reason other than to try to convince everyone that they are the world's biggest freak. On a more serious note, I think you'll want to think about how to tackle this next part if you are a completionist. Throughout each and every game, Trails has a ranking system that rates you on your progress throughout these games. The reward of these are cool and they can actually impact the game with weapons and armor, but they can also be related to something like a Steam achievement, for instance. Generally, you get these points from completing side quests as well as advancing the main story, but the problem starts when they start throwing things like giving out points for choosing the correct option in a series of dialogue choices, or a hidden quest that's out of the way from where the main story is, or performing well in an unwinnable battle. They do have access points, so you don't have to worry about getting every point, but it does quickly add up and it can get you locked out of the max rank if you're not paying attention. They do offer a pretty robust new game plus, which I'm the type of person to replay RPGs for fun, trying different party members or strategies and experiencing the story again, so usually I'll go for 100% on second playthroughs. I do, however, know that there are quite a few people who like to play through RPGs once and only once, and they want to get the most full experience that they can, so I want to warn you that there are quite a bit of missable stuff if that's a problem for you. I have seen spoiler-free guides on different Trails games on the Steam guide page as well as other places on the web, so if you're looking for a more stress-free completion, I would definitely check those out. I haven't actually combed through them, so I can't say how spoiler-free they are, so viewer beware, but they at least advertise that there's no spoilers. There's a lot of great quality of life stuff in the Trails series. The best thing, and one thing every RPG should have, is a speed up feature. Their system speeds up animations, but it doesn't increase the music, the voice acting, or the sound effects, so you don't blast your ears when you're trying to speed things up. Expanding on that a little bit, RPGs can get kind of tedious with combat, and sometimes walking from place to place for the 500th time with no surprises is kind of boring. It's nice to have an option which will cut down on the repetitional stuff, and it's also good if you like grinding in games. One quality of life thing that you may or may not enjoy is that when you game over in a fight and select retry, it will nerf the enemy's HP, damage, and increase their damage taken. In later games, it'll give you the option to retry or retry and weaken enemies. Some fights I hated having the nerf because I wanted the challenge for a story fight, and sometimes you can just start up a fight, get wrecked, and get game over immediately. Though I gotta come clean, some fights I did not want to deal with, so I inted a few game overs to make them easier. I think mainly I dislike this feature, but there are times that it saved me a ton of frustration, so I'll give it a pass. When they gave me the option to lower the difficulty, my ego would not let me drop it down, no matter how much I was frustrated at the game. Every arc outside of the Sky Arc keeps a record of the dialogue, so if you accidentally mash through a text box or you lose track about what's being discussed, you can just look back and get a quick little refresher. I especially love this for Trails because they love to have every character talk, and sometimes I mash a little too fast when everyone is getting their input in. So I will go back and reread what they said. Very nice feature for RPGs, and I hope a lot more different games add it. It also saves the dialogue in between play sessions, so if you're coming back from a break, you're able to take advantage of it and pick up exactly where you left off. The Crossbell and Calvard Arcs have an awesome feature which will display a song name when the song changes. If you enjoy video game soundtracks, I would look forward to those in particular since you have the song name right in front of you. Personally, I love it when games give you a heads up when big story events happen and you're passing a point of no return in case you want to do side quests, and that is also in Trails. If you only have a finite time to play and that screen pops up, you can wait until you have more time to start the next part, and it obviously gives you a chance to finish up any side quests before continuing. It's also really just awesome with knowing when to focus more on the story so you can watch scenes play out in its entirety. So if you're not in the mood for getting a big lore dump, you can do the side content and wait until you're ready to get a lot more invested in the series. I know some people don't like this feature when it shows up in games, but I really don't think that's a problem, and especially in Trails, you get this message anytime you're about to progress the story anyway, whether it's something that's not very impactful to the lore or if it's something that is incredibly important. Lastly, it's a super minor thing, but being able to save anywhere is a nice little feature, so you're not bound to needing to be inside of an inn or a town. I frequently saved in front of quests or event triggers when I was done playing, so I remember exactly where I was when I was getting ready to start up and play again. If you're interested on where to buy the different Trails series, here's a little chart for you. Basically, the original Sky Arc is only available on PC through Steam. Every other game in the series is available through PC, the Nintendo Switch eShop, and the PlayStation Store. The remake of the Trails in the Sky First chapter will also be available on Steam, as well as the Nintendo Switch eShop and the PlayStation Store. Going from game to game, they'll usually let you carry things over from one playthrough to the next game, but not between different arcs. So it might be something that you want to do if you want to keep all of the arcs on one platform. This series is very frequently on Steam sales. I don't know about the Nintendo Switch eShop or the PlayStation Store for sales. I know that Steam is very frequent in their sales, so a lot of the time, if you just search for Trails games, you'll find one of them is usually on sale. So you could also just wait for one to go on sale and buy that and play that one. Those would be the best places to get the different games. Well, here we are, the end of the video. I think the Trails series is phenomenal, and I really hope more people go out and give it a shot. I still love that Falcom is able to be so in-depth in the world, having reasons for how everything exists and giving all the different characters an opportunity to grow is something that I think they do insanely well. I think a lot of the scenarios that happen feel very realistic to the real world, and sometimes they just don't pull any punches, which is kind of wild. If you still feel like this series is too long, let me just say one last time. I do think the tools that are provided in this series do help kind of negate that, maybe to like a fault if you're just like binging through it. Things like the story recap in subsequent games in an arc help a lot. And even, repeating things in kind of that classic anime trope. I don't think you have to binge the entire series to get a great experience out of it. I think it should be at least a series that you give a try. And if you don't like it, you don't like it, and that's fine. But I just don't want the size of the series to be something that makes people not want to even try the game or even try it out in the first place. So yeah, I think you should play Trails. It's a great series and awesome and gives you a whole ton of fun, and they're insanely high quality games. As for myself, my name is Typic, and you can find me on Twitch, Blue Sky, and Twitter under the name Typic. Thank you once again for watching. Take care out there, and I'll see you in the next video.